Today I'm going to share with you how to make fermented mustard, and I'm going to show you 3 different varieties, and they're all going to be probiotic rich, wonderful for good gut health, and better than anything you can find at the grocery store. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, sourdough, ferments, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. So today we're going to make 3 different types of fermented mustard. And these are all very basic recipes that you can then take and customize any way you want, adding herbs and spices, so on and so forth. But this way, you'll have the recipes for the very basic fermented mustards. The first mustard will be a traditional yellow, the second one will be a stone ground, and the third one will be a honey mustard. Now the ingredients that you're going to need to make all 3, so these are the total ingredients that you're going to need, are 1.25 cups of mustard powder. You can use anything you want. I really like the Coleman's English mustard, but any mustard powder that you like that you can find at your grocery store is fine. So 1.25 cups of the powdered mustard. And then you're going to want 1/4 cup of mustard seeds. And then you're going to want 3 tablespoons of honey, and I recommend using a light pourable honey for this. This is actually a nice honey right from here in the Austin, Texas area, and it's a wildflower honey. And then you're going to need 3 teaspoons of sea salt. This is a fine ground sea salt. And then, I'm not going to pick this up, I don't want to spill it, but you're going to need some whey. And whey is the liquid that you drain off when you drain some yogurt to make yogurt cheese, or you drain some kefir to make kefir cheese. That's exactly what you're going to need for this. Now, if you don't have any whey, that's no problem. Other options are you can use some kombucha, or you can use some water kefir. But the salt and the whey are very important because they help with the lacto-fermentation process that we're going to get started with each of these mustards. Now, those of you who have been with me for a while and have seen my videos on fermentation, I often tell you that I don't like to use whey when I'm fermenting vegetables. And that's true because I find sometimes it can impart a little bit of a milky flavor. But I don't find that to be the case when I use whey to make condiments like mayonnaise or ketchup, and neither do I notice that taste with mustard. If anything, I think the whey actually helps, especially with the ketchup and the mustard, to cut some of the sharpness of flavor that's associated with tomatoes, that is sharp acidic flavor that's associated with tomatoes, or the sharp flavor that's associated with mustard. So whey works very well in these ferments. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is put 1/2 cup of the mustard powder into this jar, for which we're going to be making the basic yellow mustard. So I've got a 1/2 cup measure here, and I'm just going to scoop, this is 1 cup, so I'm just going to scoop out 1/2 cup and put it into my 1/2 cup measuring cup. And now I'm just going to put this 1/2 cup right into our jar. Next, we're going to add in 3 tablespoons of whey. Or, as I said, you can use kombucha or water kefir. But this is really going to help with the lacto-fermentation. And then next, we're going to add a teaspoon of the fine ground sea salt. Now we're going to give this a good whisk, and then we're going to see if we need to add any water to it to get it to the right consistency. And you can use a fork or a regular little round whisk if you have one. I love this little magic whisk. I think I've showed this to you before. I once saw Nigella Lawson using this on one of her cooking shows, and she kept raving about it. And so I said, I have to get one of these. And it is such a dream. It works so well for doing little jobs like this, even big jobs. I've used it for eggs, and I really think it's just terrific. It works better than any other whisk that I have, and that's why I think it's called the magic whisk. But I'll put a link to it. They're very reasonable. They cost a couple of dollars. You probably can even find one in the kitchen store in your area. But I'll put a link in the description below. I just found mine on Amazon. Alrighty, now we've got this all whisked up, and this is a little too thick, so we're going to start adding in some water, and I'm going to start with just a tablespoon. I'm just going to use this tablespoon that I have here, and I've got filtered water. You don't want to use chlorinated water because that can damage the lacto-fermentation process. Now, if you have some bottled filtered water, great. If not, you can just use your tap water, but just let it sit out overnight covered to let the chlorine dissipate, because it's usually the chlorine in the tap water that's detrimental to the fermentation. Alrighty, well, we've got that 1 tablespoon in there. We'll give it another stir and we'll see how we like the consistency. This smells so good. I really wish there was, you joke, you hear people say smell-o-vision. This smells so good. There's nothing like a homemade mustard. It just smells wonderful compared to what you can buy at the store. Now, I think for us, I feel this is still a little thick for what we would like. But again, this is personal preference. So I think that's a little thick. So I'm just going to add a teaspoon more of water, and then I'll see if I like that consistency. We'll give this another stir. Oh, this looks perfect. I think this is going to be the right consistency. So as you see, just a little trial and error to get it to the consistency of mustard that you like. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Great. Well, that's 1 finished. Now we'll move on to the other 2, and once we get them all done, then I'll explain to you what we do to let them ferment. Now don't worry, you don't need to wash your whisk or your fork, whatever you're using. We're going to use that same one to mix each one of these. Next, we're going to take that remaining ½ cup of mustard powder, and we're going to put it in the second jar. So this is just ½ cup of mustard powder going into this middle jar. Now for the mustard seed, you have a couple of options. You can put this in one of those little mini coffee grinders, and you don't want to grind it to a powder. You want to be very careful. You just want to chop it up. But what I like to do is put them in a little plastic bag like this and just take a meat pounder and just try to break them up. So all I do is just, as I showed you, put them in a little bag like this. Just let a little bit of that air out so I can flatten it out. And then I just take the flat edge of a meat pounder, and then I just get out all my energy. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pour those right into my jar. Now for the stone ground mustard, we're going to need 6 tablespoons of whey. And we're going to add in 1.5 teaspoons. I'm just going to kind of eyeball that of the sea salt. And now, just like we did with the plain mustard, the plain yellow mustard, we'll give this a stir and we'll see how the consistency is, and we can determine how much water, if any, we need to add. Now I have to tell you, stone ground mustard is our favorite. So I made a little larger amount of this than I did of the plain yellow mustard. But you can certainly cut this recipe in half. Okay, well this is still a little too thick, so I am going to add 1 tablespoon of water to start, and then we'll see how much more we need after that. I think that's perfect. Look at that. That's a perfect consistency for us. And that's a nice stone ground mustard. You can see all those little mustard seeds in there. Perfect. Now the final mustard that we're going to make is the honey mustard. And we're going to put 1/4 cup of the mustard powder. And again, we don't need a lot of honey mustard, so I'm making a small amount, but you can certainly double this recipe. And for this, we only need about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. But again, these are very basic recipes. Once you make them and you taste them, you may decide you want a little more salt or a little less salt. It's really personal choice. And then in here, we want about 1.5 tablespoons of the whey. And again, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. You don't need to be super precise with the whey. Now I've made sure I don't have any mustard seeds on this, and I'm just going to go ahead and add in our honey. And now we'll just give this a good stir, and like with the other 2, we'll see if we need to add any water. Well, I think this is perfect. I don't think we need to add any water. Well, that's a perfect consistency for honey mustard. Now the next step, all you need to do is just put a cap on each one of these jars. And these are just, nice pint size canning jars that I'm using here. And they're wide mouth, and these are the wide mouth storage lids. And you just put those on. And then you want to put these in a warm place in your kitchen undisturbed. And then you want to keep an eye on them, because in warm weather, they'll start to ferment quickly, as soon as 2 days. In colder weather and in cooler kitchens, it may take up to 5 days. And what you're going to look for is a little bubbling and a little fizziness, and you'll definitely be able to recognize the fermentation process going on. And what's happening is the yeast and the bacteria are starting to eat what's in there in the mustard, and then the bacteria is letting off CO2, which is carbon dioxide, and that's what's causing the lacto-fermentation process, or that's the byproduct of the lacto-fermentation process. And so what you need to do when you start to see it getting foamy, you'll want to burp it, because you want to release some of that CO2. But after a couple of days of it being fizzy and foaming and whatnot, it's ready to be refrigerated. And as I said, it will start in warm kitchens within 2 days most likely, and in 3 days it's probably ready, even maybe at 2 days, to be refrigerated. And you'll want to do the same for each of these. You'll want to keep an eye on it. When it starts to get a little foamy, release it, then give it another day, release it again, and put it in your fridge. And the same with each one. Watch it. After probably 2 days, it'll start to get a little foamy. It's starting that fermentation process. Let some of that CO2 out. Put the lid back on. Probably the 3rd day, everything's ready to be refrigerated. These, work very well just right in these kind of jars. If you have a squeeze bottle or something and you want to transfer the yellow mustard to that, that works well too. Now, you do have some options. Because I feel that these have a short fermentation process, I never worry about using these storage lids. If I have to burp it 1 or 2 days, even up to 5 days, but I live in Central Texas. It's kind of warm all the time here, maybe except January and February. So things ferment pretty quickly in my kitchen. With short ferments like this, I don't worry too much about having to burp it. But if you don't want to do that, there are all sorts of airlock type systems now for fermenting things, but I've been fermenting for so long, I'm kind of used to the old-fashioned ways. But there are these pickle pipes, as well as I said, there's a whole host of different type of airlocks and fermentation lids that you can find today online or at local kitchen stores and whatnot. But if you decide this is one of those pickle pipes, and I'll put a link in the description below to where you can find these. They're on Amazon, but as I said, check your kitchen stores and your big box stores, because they're becoming very common. And if you use one of these, all you do is put it on like this. Then you're going to need a canning ring, wide mouth canning ring. You're going to put it on very easily, 1, 2, 3. It's got a very small little hole in the top. It'll release the CO2, but it won't let in any oxygen. And again, just watch it when it starts to get a little fizzy, a little bubbly. At that point, as I said, after the 2nd day, in warm weather, it'll start to look a little fizzy, and a little bubbly. And probably by the 3rd day, it's going to be ready. Even by the 2nd day, it may be ready if you see it being very active. And then you want to put a storage lid on to refrigerate it. Now, these keep fermenting in the refrigerator. The fermentation just slows down considerably. And these can last quite a good while in your fridge. I would say at least 6 months. But in these small amounts, I don't make mustard in large amounts, and you can double, you can even triple these recipes if you find you use a lot of mustard. They're not going to be around that long. But, I would say up to at least 6 months, they'll stay fresh, if not longer, in your fridge. So I hope you'll give 1 or all 3 of these fermented mustards a try. And if you'd like to learn more about traditional cooking, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and then click on this video over here where I show you how to make homemade mayonnaise using a special blend of oils that are not only nutritious, they're delicious. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love and God bless.